Welcome, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the social media and sports podcast, but not for much longer, but we'll get into that later. First things first, congrats to the UConn Huskies for winning the national championship. And with the college basketball season ending, Matt and I will revisit our preseason college basketball cap or no cap and look at what all we got right and wrong. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into our cap or no cap, I do want to announce the results of the Twitter poll because we asked the question, is UConn officially a blue blood? I do want to say that an overwhelming 75% did agree that UConn is officially reached the blue blood status. So shout out to the Huskies for whatever that's worth, I guess.
It's worth approximately one clap of approval from Bean.
Let's go. Let's get it, Bean. He clapped.
As a dog himself, he must feel some kind of joy over this.
Oh, he was really excited. So like
Good.
when it was, it wasn't obviously the nail biter national championship game that I think a lot of people want, but like Bean was loving every second of it.
That's good. I'm glad Bean enjoyed watching his brethren on the court do very well.
He was a lot happier than I was, that's for sure. Ain't that right, bud?
Yes.
Anyways, so go back to visiting our first cap or no cap episode. The first narrative that we talked to was that, or the first narrative that we talked about was Kansas having a legit chance to go back to back. And technically, Matt, we were both right because you said yes because it's college basketball and everyone has a chance to win and Kansas would be good. And of course, they were a 1 seed in the tournament with by far the most quad one wins in college basketball. Now, me on the other hand, it was all about perspective. I capped this because I thought after losing 4 starters from a season ago, they would not specifically go back to back. But of course, I didn't make the claim that they would be bad. So technically, by a formality, I think we were both right in that regard.
Yeah, I don't see how we were wrong, either one of us.
I don't either. So do you have anything left to say about that one, or should we move on to the second narrative?
No, the one thing I would like to say is I just wonder what Kansas would have done if they didn't. And I know this isn't all that happened to them because I'm going to give credit to Arkansas because we were always high on Arkansas. But I can't help but wonder if the Bill Self health situation had some kind of impact over that tournament run. And it would be interesting to see if he was on the sideline, if it ends any differently. But like you said, it's just so hard to go back to back that just being good enough is all you can ask of a team after they win the national championship, it feels like.
Right. And that's why I feel like we were both right on that regard. Like, I don't think it was just depending on your perspective and how you wanted to answer it, I guess.
Yeah.
So now we're going from one that I think we both had right to one that I think we couldn't have gotten more wrong. And the second narrative, if you remember, was UNC was a 1-year wonder. And we both capped it. I went as far as to say it's the cappiest of caps that's ever capped. But 4 returners from the title appearance from a season ago, preseason number 1, only to miss the tournament, which shout out to my Blue Devils on ending their season. Getting them back for ending Coach K's career. Of course, you know how to throw that out there. But Matt, how disappointing was this for the Tar Heels?
I still don't know how the hell this happened. I mean, a team that returned those 4 starters, added Pete Nance, had Leaky Black, had who knows who else on that roster, and they just absolutely looked like they were dead in the water from point A to point B. They almost lost to College of Charleston early on. Of course, they turned out to be very good. I mean, I can't put adequately into words what went wrong, what happened. I, it just makes no flipping sense. It seems like I guess this just proves that college basketball isn't the NBA, where you can put the 4 best players on the court and and just win. It's not like that, I guess. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I don't know if Brady Manick was just the glue that held that thing together. And none of it made any sense. They were just atrocious at times. I specifically remember watching that last NC State game. That was kind of like the nail in the coffin on a random Sunday afternoon. And it just looked like the team didn't want to even be there. It just looked like North Carolina wanted to go home. I have no idea how this went so wrong, but the fact it did just proves how like even Kansas making the round of 32 is pretty darn impressive because or Sweet 16 is pretty darn impressive because you just don't know who's going to win anymore. It's a whole new world, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We praised Arkansas for putting it all together at the last second and going on a pretty good run, and North Carolina couldn't even do that with 4 returning starters. It makes no sense.
And now they're losing everybody except Armando Bacot and RJ Davis.
Maybe that's better. Maybe they just need to focus on 2 guys.
Maybe. I mean, whatever they did this season obviously did not work. So
No, it's so weird.
yeah. But anyways, moving on to the third narrative, Gonzaga is the best non-Power 5 team, and we both capped it. I said Houston, you said Houston and Dayton. Houston was good. Gonzaga did go farther in the tournament than Houston, but I would still argue head-to-head, Houston was the better team. But we also had 2 non-Power 5 teams in the Final Four, 3 if you include the Big East outside of the Power 5. So obviously, come on, clearly Gonzaga was not the best non-Power 5 team. Matt, what you got to add?
The one thing I want to see now is an FAU Gonzaga game. That's all I'm gonna. That's really what I want now. Just watch that happen. But yeah, I mean, we were right. I mean, what derailed Dayton this year was they had a crap ton of injuries. Same thing as my another team I really enjoyed. Ironically, in the Mountain West, Wyoming, just so injury ravaged. Whether it was things happening to Graham Ike for what Wyoming or point guards for Dayton going down. 2 teams that never really got a fighting chance because they just couldn't figure it out because they were always hurt. But as per natural, when one star falls apart, another star rises up, and in this case, it was the FAU Owls with John L. Davis and Vlad Golden coming out of nowhere. Matt Bradley was a guy I was high on. I do remember I picked him in our draft.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember doing that. So I'm glad he got his redemption arc, even if he didn't really come on strong in a few games. But I'm just happy we had a lot of mid-major representation, even though Gonzaga really isn't like a mid-major anymore, and I wouldn't consider anybody in the Big East a mid-major now. And you know what the most ironic thing is, Les?
What?
One team we both agreed would be the best mid-major won't be a mid-major next season at all. They're
Right.
going to the Big 12, so someone will rise up and take their place, and it's going to be interesting to see who it is. I'm just excited that even with all that, we had FAU and San Diego State battling in the Final Four in a game people still watch. So I don't want to hear anybody moan and complain about how it makes basketball unwatchable. It only hurt the championship game really because once UConn got up, we all knew who was going to win. But I mean, that's it. That's all I gotta say. Is like even when one star falls apart, it's always good to know that another star that you kind of see coming, but you're still not sure, or sometimes out of nowhere. In the case of like Fairleigh Dickinson, Princeton, and Furman, will come up and take the place of a team like that. So very happy for all that. Very happy for Houston. It'll be interesting to see now what happens to them as they prepare to enter the Big 12. Just a great tournament.
Yeah, I know like the Big East is technically not a Power 5, and those who are listening on the Spotify channel probably can't see that I'm throwing up the bunny ears right now because like even though Big East is technically not the Power 5, technically they're honestly they were the second best conference in college basketball this year. So really it should be like more of a Power 6 to be honest. So I
Hey
just wanted
Les,
to clear. Yes,
spin-off question for you.
sure.
Should Gonzaga join the Big East?
No.
No.
I think Gonzaga should join a Power 5. I don't know about the Big East.
The reason why I say the Big East is just because football.
Oh, because they don't really have a football
Yeah, they don't have
power.
many football schools, and you can get away with that in the Big East if you want to join the Pac-12, even though they may get so desperate. I don't
Mhm.
know. It'll be interesting to see, but just curious to hear your opinion on that one because I had seen that floated around, and I like it. Anything that makes college basketball more competitive.
Right. I think they should join a Power 5 team. I'm not really wasn't really prepared to answer what Power 5 team, but
Oh, you're fine, unless that's completely off the cuff.
oh yeah, yeah, that's kind of what we do. I think this also kind of tails into our next narrative that we're going to talk about. But you know, what's funny is we talk about how I guess down the views were for the national title game, but like still 14 million people tuned in.
More than NBA Finals games.
Exactly. So I mean, clearly it's doing just. I mean, if you're getting 14 million people to tune in, you're still, and that's a low number. You're doing something right. Is all
Yes,
I'm gonna.
you've got a good product.
Right. Just don't mess with it. Even though I think, unfortunately, that they are messing with it in the coming years. But that's not what's going to lead on to our next narrative that we talked about. And this being said, our next narrative that we both capped was NIL is ruining college basketball. And we both capped it for good reason. I mean, obviously, this was long overdue that players are finally reaping the benefits of the money that they deserve, for one, but it's added parity to college basketball. It's kept players around longer. And all that, that's what all the old heads were worried about, right? But I mean, it's keeping players around. And then, of course, Matt, you mentioned in our original Cap or No Cap episode, Nigel Pack, him and Miami made the Final Four. So,
Yep,
I
yep,
mean,
yep.
yeah, NIL's added parity to college basketball. Matt, what you got to add?
I mean, like you said, we got the ultimate proof of that when Miami, who, in spite of the fact they have had a few successful seasons, they don't have consistent success. They're not a basketball power. And with NIL, they get Nigel Pack, they get Norchad Omier, and they're out of nowhere they're in the Final Four, and they beat some pretty damn good teams to get there. So yeah, I think that's the proof positive we need that like if you've got the resources and you've got the players to go with it already in place, you can just build a team. This isn't the olden days where you had to wait like a recruiting cycle to get the guys you needed. This is like you can rebuild an entire roster, strip it down, put it back together in terms of an off season because you can use NIL money to get to mine the transfer portal. Maybe your team only has one issue, like let's say what we thought UConn was, a shot maker. Now you don't have to wait for like that 5-star kid you're recruiting out of Palo Alto to finally hit 18. You can just go out and get this kid who played in the Big Sky who had a 30% shooting rate, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got yourself a championship team. And that's
Was that
what
a
Jim
reference
Larnay
to the? Was that a reference to the all Matt McClellan first team player that we often reference on the show?
maybe,
Maybe.
maybe it wasn't. The point being, Jim Larnega did that, which is amazing because he has a good school and a good climate with a lot of money. And you know what? I don't fault him for that. If you've got the resources and you're not a basketball power, you've got to flaunt them. And Jim Larnega did that. He got a good chemistry going. And the next thing you know, Miami Hurricanes are in the Final Four from an ACC conference everyone thought was incredibly weak. Got to give props. Proof positive that NIL did not ruin the sport. And if you want further proof of that, we had two mid majors on the other side of the bracket with no NIL money who had a bunch of old heads on their team. And
Which
then you have you.
before you continue, that is exactly what your point was in our original Cap or No Cap. You're like, because you mentioned St. Peter's and how they went on the Elite Eight run. You said there ain't no NIL money. There ain't. It's just a good story and a good coach and some good players. And that's exactly what we saw carrying over in this one.
And
Continue.
that's
I
what
was just shouting you out.
and that's what you got with Dusty May and Brian Dredger. I can't pronounce his name correctly.
Mhm.
The only one that doesn't is UConn, and like we said, they're basically approaching blue blood status. But even they didn't have a lot of NIL guys. They had a couple freshmen, and they had a lot of guys who just bought into Bobby Hurley's system. And
Danny.
Danny Hurley's system. Sorry, Bobby. He's at Arizona State and whatnot. But point being, Les, that like this Final Four was proof positive that NIL can work, and it's also not ruining the sport.
Exactly. So I think that's all we got to say about that narrative. Moving on to the fifth narrative. And of course, I'm going to prove it right here and now. The narrative was big men return to prominence in college hoops. And we both cap this. I mean, no, we both no cap this. I mean, and Zach Edey won player of the year. I rest my case. Matt, what else you got to say?
Not much. I mean, the most outstanding player in the tournament was Adama Sanogo, so that helps.
Mm-hmm.
That helps. Trace Jackson Davis, first team All American, first team everything. Shibwe, I think, had like 50 rebounds in 2 games in the NCAA tournament. It may not have been like, I mean, we look at what caused UConn to win, especially is the fact they pounded the middle during that game with center after center. It didn't matter if it was Sanogo, Donovan Klingham. They had big guys coming off the bench. So even though one wins player of the year, like you said, Zach 87-4, one wins out most outstanding player in the tournament, then it pretty much proves that it was the year of the big man, even if it wasn't the ones we were thinking of in college basketball.
I mean, we mentioned Zach Edey.
We did, we did.
We
Not
didn't
as
mention
intense.
Sonogo, which I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like that was the one of the one areas that we were different than other college basketball podcast episodes is Sonogo was the preseason Big East, sorry, player of the year. So I feel like we may have missed that mark a little bit, but is what it is. We still enjoyed it in
I
the
couldn't agree.
ride that was this season.
My only
So
mistake was standing Creighton.
I
Damn you,
mean,
right? Right.
Creighton still went on a decent little run though.
Yeah, in spite of that rough patch, and just like UConn, rough patch in the middle of the season, rebounded from that. Made
And honestly, if kind of like what we said about Arkansas in the previous episode, what if Creighton doesn't have injury issues? Because if you remember, Ryan Kalkbrenner went
yeah,
down and they lost 6 in a row with his
true.
injury.
Yep,
Well,
that's
I
true,
mean,
and he came back with a vengeance.
yeah, he came back with a vengeance. I'm going to be honest, as we're still on the topic of big men, Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think he has a very NBA level game personally. A lot of
What?
people disagree.
Yeah.
A lot of people disagree, but I like his. I think he transitions well in the NBA.
Look, if Walker Kessler can make it, I think he can make it too.
Dude, that was something that me and some of my other friends we joke about is how I was not high on Walker Kessler at all. And I specifically said on this podcast that Walker Kessler would be out of the league in a couple years. And he's gonna be first team all rookie. And he made the All-Star Skills Challenge and all that fun stuff. And it's like, oh well, I'm looking really dumb right about now.
We're all wrong.
Not to mention what's even funny about that is Walker Kessler, fun fact, Walker Kessler has more blocks this season than Rudy Gobert, which is ironic because Walker Kessler was involved in the Rudy Gobert trade.
You were right about that one though, Les. I remember you said that trade didn't make any sense, and I was a little bit higher on it. And it's they're gonna make the playoffs, but it's not like the Timberwolves are great or anything. So you're right about that one. You got that one right.
And honestly, if I'm not mistaken, the Timberwolves have been better when they have either Karl Anthony Towns or Rudy Gobert in the lineup, but not with both.
Yep. Like we said, where's the shooting?
Well, where's the perimeter defense? Because if you're gonna slide one down to the 4, it's not a good good match.
Not a good matchup.
Anyways, we kind of got a little bit off topic, but that's okay. We had fun with it. Going on to the 6th narrative that the Big 12 was the best conference. Matt, you capped it and said SEC. Thoughts in hindsight?
I mean, I guess we were both kind of off about this because I think maybe, I mean, head to toe, and I know this is recency bias, but looking back on it, the excuse me, the Big East was really damn good. I mean, we didn't see Marquette coming. Providence had a really good run until they ran in. Providence had a pretty good run until they hit Kentucky. Um, Sharif Holloway had a group of guys who came together a little bit too late at Seton Hall, but they were a tough go down the stretch. Like we said, Creighton went through that stretch and then they got a lot better. UConn went through a skid, got better. I think maybe the Big East was probably the best conference as a whole, but I don't think the SEC was a bad pick. They had a lot of teams get in. I mean, you had Tennessee, they made a good run. Mississippi State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Vanderbilt came on pretty strong, but just a little bit too late. So I don't regret saying that at all. I feel like there were like three, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big East were like the three big boys when it came to the conference play. And the Big 12, I think, might have just been a little forehead above, just because they had so few teams and they were all so very good.
I also capped it, and I said the ACC. And ironically enough, as an ACC team that made the Final Four and a Big 12 team did not make the Final Four, I'm going to change my opinion and say it is pretty much the Big 12 and the Big East were the two best conferences in college basketball this year. Both top to bottom, both were loaded, both were just absolute. Both conferences were absolute dogfights every night in conference play.
Yeah.
But the ACC was, and in similar recent years, underrated. Like I said, Miami made the Final Four. Duke came on strong at the end of the year. But one of the big disappointments was, of course, how North Carolina That was, yeah, I couldn't, yeah, I don't know. Like you said, it does not make sense. Don't know if we'll ever make sense of it,
If
but
you had told me back when we were recording that cap or no cap episode that Pittsburgh was going to make it into the tournament and make it further than North Carolina, I probably would have laughed and taken like a $50 bet that you were full of you know what.
if
And
I said that, keep in mind now, Matt, Matt and I are not close in proximity when it comes to where we live. Matt
no,
would have driven to my house during that while recording and handed me a drug test and asked me to go take it.
yes, I would have been like, here's your cup, you know what to do.
Exactly. But no, I mean, it just goes to show, like, you just never know what you can never predict, but we try.
We try. That's what people are here for. And when we're wrong, they laugh at us, but it's fun.
But when we're right, we look really smart.
That's true.
That's true. And speaking of something we were right about, our seventh narrative, Villanova misses Jay Wright more than Duke misses Mike Krzyzewski. Matt, I'm gonna let you start with this one because y'all know what I'm gonna say.
I know what you're gonna say. I believe my quote about this one was like, "There's nothing wrong with Vanderbilt, but the problem is Duke is a brand. Duke's a
Vanderbilt.
or Vanderbilt, Villanova. My bad. They both start with V. Okay, there's only so many schools that start with V.
One
They
of
have
which Jerry Stackhouse does not coach at, okay?
okay. Well, I like Jerry Stackhouse. We
I
should
do
get him
too.
on.
Except no, wait, no, I don't. He's a Tar Heel.
I'm gonna
Forget him.
say, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Les is turning soft on me. But I believe that my exact quote was the difference between Villanova and Duke is that Duke is a brand at this point. Duke's been around for the past 20, 30, has been around for the past 50 years almost as a really high power. They are Duke. Villanova, they have the national championships, but they're also a smaller Big East school in Philadelphia. And Villanova was another team in the Big East where they just started to come on. They had that injury to Justin Moore, and it really, really derailed the season from that point. When he came back, Villanova looked like a different team, but unfortunately, they just ran out of time to like go on a very good run. There were a lot of teams like that this year, which made for some interesting play down the stretch. But without Moore, they were a different team. They struggled earlier than that throughout the year. And let's be honest, Duke did too. But Duke had a few more 5-star recruits because they are Duke. And that's what made the difference. When those 5-star guys came together, you had a pretty deep team. When Villanova's guys came together, you had a team that was pretty good, but still had some glaring issues. And that's what made all the difference. Is that when Duke came together, they had more depth. And when Villanova came together, they just didn't have one thing that would have put them over the top. And so I feel like that's just what we said. That's pretty much what we said. Like the brand of Duke was going to be fine, that it didn't matter who was coaching it. I mean, I really like Kyle Neptune. I like him a lot. I think next year they're going to rebound and be even better. But like that's just the problem. When you don't get it when Jay Wright leaves and you have guys decommit on you, it's harder to fill those spots. And when like I'm going to Duke to go play for Duke, it's the advantage of being a blue blood.
100%. And just to validate what you're saying, Villanova was 17-17 on the season and missed the tournament. Duke went 27-9, won the ACC tournament championship, undefeated at home, 19-1 with a healthy roster, and has given Duke fans a lot to be optimistic about going forward. Y'all know I'm gonna like praise my Blue Devils, so I'm gonna shock the world and not, and we're gonna keep moving on. So moving on to the eighth narrative, this freshman class was better than last season's. Matt, cap this. How you feeling now in hindsight?
How am I feeling now in hindsight? That's a good question. I mean, we haven't talked about it because it's still kind of a touchy issue, but I mean, for a while it looked like the best player in the country was Brandon Miller, and he was going to not only lead Alabama from like out of nowhere to be one of the top teams, probably the national champion, but I mean, he looked really good. Filipowski finally came on. Lively came on. I mean, I think that these guys across the board, the only guy who kind of disappointed me, and he really didn't, it's just because of the whole team, was Cam Whitmore. I was really high on him. And like you said, Villanova just struggled in general the whole time, the whole
Mm-hmm.
year. So yeah, it's hard to really be like, oh yeah, he sucked, because he really didn't suck. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I still think that's a valid statement to make. A lot of the freshmen came in and made a big differences for their teams. it's still ironic to me that the biggest impact freshman in the Final Four was the backup 7'2" center on UConn. But that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. When you play with freshmen, you play with freshman level experience. Sometimes raw talent's enough. Sometimes it falls flat in your face, especially when you're playing a team like San Diego State, which is a bunch of old men who are scrappy and going to fight for every freaking point they've got. So I still think this is a good point. I didn't cap it because I really like Brandon Miller. You talked me into a few guys. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, who among the freshmen goes to the draft and comes back because, like you said, it's a different world with NIL and the default number one pick being a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who doesn't even play college basketball, and Scoop Henderson doesn't play college basketball. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how many of these guys come back, who goes, who raise their star, etc. going forward.
And obviously, I mean, just being a Duke fan, we've already seen the results of players coming back. Tyrese Proctor and Mark Mitchell, at the point of this recording, are coming back. Lively and Whitehead have declared. We're still waiting. At this point of the recording, we're still waiting on Kyle Filipowski to make his decision. But back to the narrative itself. I half capped this. I thought this year's class is deeper, but I thought the year before was more top heavy because if you remember, you had Paulo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, and Jabari Smith. I stand by that. I don't feel like there was a group of three that matches those guys, but I feel like depth. I feel like favored this year's class. And even though we may not have as many freshmen, going pro this year, the ones that are coming back still are going to be really good and have an impact on college basketball in the next year or so. So I remember in our cap or no cap episode, I was really high on JJ Starling, and he was the 30th ranked recruit in the class. And, as you all know, he's transferring from Notre Dame to Syracuse. I still think he's a really good player. And again, if there are 29 players in this class that are better than him, I'd like to see him because he's a damn good player. Anyways, on to the number 9th team. The local teams will all be good. And Matt half capped this because of Louisville, and he was right. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I don't want to make it any worse for Louisville fans. They've suffered enough. They've suffered enough, Les. I don't need to remind them what happened. I don't need to remind you what happened. I will say that I'm getting more and more alarmed each day because of the amount of players that are just exodusing from this program. I know they've brought in Sky Moore. I know they've brought in Evans from Minnesota.
Sky Clark.
Sky Clark. Ugh.
Sky Moore is the receiver for the Chiefs.
Kansas City. God dang it. Either way, L. Ellis gone. Basically, I know that roster was terrible, but you've got so much turnover now, Les, and I don't know.
I personally think that's a sign of who all is going to be coming in through the transfer portal. Me personally.
I hope Louisville fans, for the sake of Louisville fans' minds, that you're right here, and that's what it does mean because, Kenny Payne won 4 games. He didn't win those games. He won 4 games, and that's not a good sign. So I'm hoping you're right because the Louisville fans, you've just suffered enough. I don't feel like making it worse on you.
So I no cap this, and I was wrong. Kentucky was solid, but they underachieved drastically from what the preseason goal was. IU was solid. U of L was awful. Western I thought would be better. Purdue I thought would be solid, but were a lot better than what I initially thought, despite their loss to FDU in the first round. So overall, I was wrong. And as we approach 10 minutes left, I am going to go ahead and go to our last narrative, in that Arkansas has arrived. And we kind of talked about it earlier on the show.
Yeah, I feel like
Matt, what do you want to add to it?
Nothing really. We've just said what we needed to say. I think that on the college message boards, they call Eric Musselman the importer. He's already getting guys in this year's transfer class to do the damn thing again. Eric Musselman just knows what the modern landscape in college basketball looks like, and he's playing it, and I applaud him for that.
Not to mention, what was it? What was the one player's name? The wing. What was it? Jordan. Oh. Why am I blanking right now?
It happens to me all the time.
But basically, do the other freshmen, do Anthony Black, the other
Nick Smith.
wing. No, Nick Smith, I'm pretty sure is gone.
Okay.
Or if he hasn't declared, he's going to declare.
Brazil's coming back.
Brazil's coming back. Yeah. So basically, the point I was trying to make before I had a massive brain fart is it's going to be interesting to see who all comes back and to add with these transfers and the recruits he does have coming in. But yeah, Arkansas's arrived. I mean, we both know Cap this. They made it to the Sweet 16 yet again, which he's done every year since he's been there. They battled injuries, but when healthy, they were legit.
And just ran into the national champ.
Yeah, and they ran into the future national champ. So is that all you got to say? Is that all we got to say about this one?
That's all we got to say. Other than I think we're batting pretty well. I'd say that's worthy of that's at least a 250 batting average, if not higher, maybe 300 even.
Oh, I think we were definitely batting higher than 300. I think we were batting at least 500 easily.
We're getting a lot of walks though.
Which is more like high school baseball batting average numbers.
I'll accept that.
Yeah. So you know what? I think we did pretty good. I think we predicted as much of a college basketball season as we could. One thing I will say that made me definitely not feel bad is the Field of 68, one of the more popular college basketball podcasts. They predicted preseason that Illinois would go to the Final Four, so I don't feel as bad.
I mean, on paper they looked really good, but that we talked about the success of the transfer portal. That was just an example of the failures of the transfer portal, which is you get guys that don't mesh and a big personality coach, and it can all come apart pretty quickly. And even then, they slipped in and almost pulled off a pretty good upset as a 9 seed. So, I can see I was high on Illinois this season too, but when you've got Terrence Shannon and Matthew Mayer, you've got a good roster.
And I really like Coleman Hawkins too.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to have those guys mesh, and if they don't mesh, then it's all over.
I think Bean's getting a little antsy. I think he's wanting us to announce the big announcement that we actually have on the Less is More Sports podcast. So I hinted at it earlier. The Less is More Sports podcast will no longer be the social media and sports podcast. We are going to be switching our theme to more of a college offseason podcast. So that means we'll be talking about recruiting news. We'll be talking about transfer news. We'll be talking about coaching carousel news. And, I do want to remind you all that Matt and I, as great of a job as we do here at the Less is More Sports podcast, we're not active journalists. So please don't listen to our show acting like we are reporting news. We are not. We are just two fans who love college sports that are just talking about what things that would really entertain us for us to happen.
I must say, I'm not even a journalism major. I'm just some guy you found on the street. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Just have some fun with college sports, because in this new era we're in, whether it be football or basketball, men's and women's, there's just so much happening in like the world of college sports, between the transfer portal, between recruiting, between coaching carousels. It's such an active world, and we love investigating that. And we feel like that's the best way to make this podcast more fun for the viewer and more fun for us going forward, is just discussing, like, you can have more fun with it. I mean, when you're talking about the NFL, who's good and who's bad generally. You very rarely get there are no FAUs in the NFL or the NBA. But around here, with this topic, we can have so much fun with it. We can speculate on transfer portal guys. We can be totally wrong and totally forget teams that are going to be a lot of fun. And you know what? That's part of it. That's part of the fun. It's like college sports is just so much more unpredictable. And that's why we're doing this. It's just because we want to be entertaining and talk about things that we actually care about, and also have more of a random factor to it, like a surprise factor to it, because that also makes for better podcasting when you don't know the outcome of everything. And so for those reasons, we decided that it's going to be more like that, and it's going to be a lot of fun for the both of us, and I can't wait.
I can't wait either. I think when we thought of this idea together, I actually got really excited, and I couldn't even wait to do this episode because I wanted to hurry up, and transition to the next period. Because, as Matt and I have mentioned on this podcast several times, the college seasons are fun as they are, but sometimes the off seasons, when the building blocks are being put into place, that's where a lot of the fun happens. So, Matt, and also I thought of this really cheesy pun. Our really cheesy slogan could be that we're less of the regular season, but more of the off season.
Oh Lord.
So we can still
I
fit the
didn't
less is
approve
more
that.
sports in there somehow.
Ugh, I didn't approve that. That can just be our slogan
I did
for the
not run this
offseason.
by Matt before the show. I want to let that know. I did
I
not run this
was
by
caught
Matt before the
completely
show.
off guard by this. Don't, I mean, that can be our off-season slogan, and then when the real season starts, I don't. When the regular season starts and bowl season, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't. We'll come up with something. I promise. We'll come up with something.
I still feel like, yeah, I still feel like it's more fun to talk about the off season though, just because there's just
It
so
is
many building blocks in
because
place.
you can
But
just
yeah.
say whatever you want and be totally wrong in September.
Oh, I
And
almost lost my train of thought. That's one thing that I will say of the list. We do appreciate the listeners that have listened throughout this whole process. I do want to say to the ones that are a fan of the show right now, some of the fan favorite episodes, like the cap or no cap episodes, will still be going on because we'll be doing preseason prediction of college football and college basketball, and we'll still be capping or no capping. So even though there will be changes, some of the favorites of the show will still be around. And of course,
oh yeah,
you always know Emperor Bean is going absolutely nowhere.
yeah, he's looking. He's looking. He's excited for this.
He's really happy. Of course, his team just won the Natty, so I mean, he's really happy.
Change pleases me.
Jordan Hawkins is the GOAT.
I love you, Anima Sanogo. Please call me back.
No, Sonogo is going to be calling Bean. Bean's not going to be calling Sonogo.
I don't know. Bean's talkative guy. He can make a good phone call.
Well, he could. It just he's not going to, just
He has
because.
little paws. They're hard to use.
No, I mean that's just how he is. His ego will not make him pick up the
Oh,
phone.
oh Lord. Oh gosh, Bean, come
Oh,
on.
he's
Well, now we pissed him off. Way to go, Bean.
that's the first time he's ever done that on this podcast. I think that's
Walked
funny.
off the set, man. He walked off the set.
Dang,
Hey,
I think this would be a good time to. I think this would be a good time to conclude the podcast. As always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports podcast, YouTube and Spotify channel. In the comment sections, tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. And we're going to be really excited to hear what y'all have to say after hearing the changes that are going to be made on the Less is More Sports podcast. But without further ado, another good episode on the Less is More Sports podcast that Matt and I had a lot of fun with, and we look forward to more coming soon. So without further ado, Matt and I are out.
welcome to the new era, friends.
Welcome to the new era. Welcome to the NIL era.
Please send
I had
us
to do it.
money.
I
Please
had to
send us
do it.
money.
Please send us money.
Please send us money.